And now for an encore to Moglu's Week of the Dragon. In Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the Dracolich is described as a dragon of any background that has willingly gone through the process of being turned into an undead creature. They were typically skeletal, though new Dracoliches were known to have bits of their remains still hanging from their bones until they had rotted away to nothing. Dracoliches were often referred to as manifestations of pure evil, as without hunger and the need to survive that drives most dragons, all that remains is evil intent. Dragons are already long-lived creatures of varying power, and are regarded by many as the ultimate form of mortal life. But for some dragons, this is simply not enough. For some, the mortal aspect of their existence, no matter how long-lived they are, is still a weakness or a mistake in their creation. These dragons were not satisfied with the normal draconic life, and like mages who desire immortality and power, these dragons delved into the darkest of magics to become more powerful. Only adult or ancient dragons have this option, as they're the only ones powerful enough to survive the process of transforming into an undead creature, retaining their powers and mind along the way. This process involves a number of mages and an extended ritual of power to aid the dragon in ascending to lichdom. During this ritual, the dragon consumes a toxic potion brewed to kill them in a very specific way, so as not to damage their corpse. Once the dragon has died, the mages involved would ensnare its soul before it can be claimed by Tiamat or another dragon god, and placed it into a sizable gem that would eventually act as its phylactery. Once the body is dead and prepared properly, the dragon's soul was then transferred back into its body to reanimate it in undeath, and then the gem is linked to this physical form, completing the process. The dragons that choose to undergo such an ordeal are those who believe themselves to be mortal versions of gods, just waiting to ascend. Like other liches, they believe that this ascension through death will make them perfect, and will allow them to conquer the world. Unfortunately for them, the ritual requires multiple magic users of significant power. Unfortunately for us, there have been many groups in Faerun willing and able to facilitate this, though none are known better than the appropriately named Cult of the Dragon. Founded by Samister, a former chosen of Mystra, the Cult of Dragon, or Followers of the Scaly Way, are a cult that venerates dragons, and specifically undead dragons. It was Samister's belief that dragons were prophesized to rule over all of Faerun, and they would do so as immortals. Unfortunately, dragons are long-lived but not immortal, and the dragon gods such as Bahamut and Tiamat claim their souls when they die. Samister found a way to circumvent this hiccup in what he saw to be the ultimate plan for Faerun. He devised a ritual used to transform dragons into Dracoliches. It was his firm belief that if the right dragon or enough dragons were perfected in undeath, civilization would fall to them and dragons would rule for eternity, with their faithful cultists ruling beneath them. While some in the cult worship gods of death, necromancy, murder, and so forth, there was no true deity of the cult. There was only draconic rule and the Scaly Way. In later materials and in the 1480s of Faerun history, a new leader of the cult named Salrajin took over and steered them over to Tiamat worship, with the ultimate goal of returning the progenitor of chromatic dragons back to the material plane, freeing her from her prison in Avernus. This transformed the Cult of the Dragon from undead necromancers to general dragon worshippers, albeit with a more focused goal. This meant that the number of Dracoliches in the world also was significantly diminished, though within the Cult of the Dragon there are still those who cling to Samister's teachings, and there are always those outside of the cult with the knowledge and power to learn and facilitate the ritual. When a dragon becomes a Dracolich, its stats are retained, with some exceptions. Black and green dragons, for instance, lose the amphibious trait, and any trait that relies on biological processes, such as breathing, are lost. In addition to their standard stat block, a Dracolich's type changes from dragon to undead, and they gain resistance to necrotic damage. They gain immunity to poison if they didn't have it before, and retain all other immunities that they had in life. They can't be poisoned, charmed, paralyzed, or frightened, and cannot suffer from exhaustion. They also gain magic resistance, gaining advantage on saving throws against magical effects. As a DM, I would use the Dracolich in the same way I would other dragons. For more details of this, check out the previous videos from the Week of the Dragon. In general though, I would have the dragon using its breath attack at every opportunity it can, and using its multi-attack on turns when this is unavailable. However, with the Dracolich, I would be more willing to stay out in the open than I would be with other dragons. For example, I tend to use black dragons as a hit and run type encounter, with them swimming and flying, staying out of the range of melee players. But with the Dracolich, this is not really necessary. With the magic resistance trait and 3 legendary resistances, magic users are going to be next to useless at higher levels, as their spells are more likely to fail, and even if they do succeed, the dragon can just choose to ignore their effects 3 times. Add to this the inability to be charmed, poisoned, paralyzed, or frightened. This lowers the crowd control ability of your party significantly. Even paladins and clerics with the Turn Undead feature will find it hard to succeed against a Dracolich, as they're one of the most powerful undead creatures and generally have amazing saving throws. All of this means that the most dangerous party members are those with magical long-range weapons and healers. The Dracolich should be targeting these players first, using wing attacks and their movement to avoid melee players. Once these players are dealt with, the Dracolich should take down the melee players one by one, until only the DPS spellcasters are remaining. For an added challenge, should you even need one, you can always give the Dracolich the ability to cast spells, as in the lore and in the monster manual it's stated that some dragons have magical abilities, and Dracoliches in particular are magically infused, and depending on how long they've existed, they may have picked up a magic trick or two. In mythology, there's no specific undead dragon. Instead, D&D has simply taken two very consistent concepts from mythology and fantasy and merged them together. As we've been discussing all last week, dragons are an important and universal part of human mythology, with almost all cultures and belief systems having some sort of a dragon myth. Medieval historian Scott Bruce from Forum University has weighed in on this, stating that the dragon is a universal cultural icon due to humanity's need for measures of virtue and bravery. He says that in most Western cultures, dragons symbolize external and internal struggles, either a murderous, almost unstoppable beast to be defeated, or a symbol for the virtues and temperance of a hero. In Eastern cultures, dragons have long been symbols of the same, as well as symbols of wisdom, nature, and a respect for the divine. He and other scholars tend to say that humans needed dragons in our cultures, because we needed something to measure the true virtue and heroism of our heroes. Similarly, all cultures have myths related to undead creatures and the perversion of life after death. Whether it be zombies, ghouls, ghosts, or vampires, humans have always feared creatures associated with death, hell, and the occult. By mixing these two concepts in 2nd edition, D&D managed to create a creature that embodies two of the most culturally significant and unifying myths in human history. If you enjoyed that video, please leave a like and comment below, and consider subscribing to the channel. You can also join the Patreon for $1 a month to access videos days before they're posted here, as well as other exclusive stuff like short stories, videos, and more.